only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine.
Carl Anderson sadly left this world on April 24th, 2008 at his daycare center, just shy of his 5th birthday. He died with his head buried in a hole, dug in a sandbox, suffocating on the wet sand which became clogged in his throat and lungs. On that same morning, Carl's parents had dropped him off at the daycare center, expecting to pick him up later in the afternoon. But at 5:30 p.m., April 24th, he was medevaced by a helicopter to an emergency hospital, and despite 17 attempts of resuscitation, he was pronounced DOA at the hospital. He died while his daycare supervisors chit-chatted about their bingo games. When asked how could this have happened, first they blamed the local volunteer fire department for not getting to the center fast enough, and then they blamed them for not resuscitating him correctly. When those excuses didn't work, they next put the blame on poor little Carl himself for burying his own head in the sand and suffocating himself. So who was really responsible for this tragic death of this innocent child? Not I, said the daycare center. Not I, said each one of the daycare center workers, and certainly not us, said their lawyers. They simply believed and saw this incident as a tragic accident and nothing more. There was no negligence whatsoever in properly supervising the children on the playground, and they were sure that each one of them would come across to a jury as caring and professional child care workers. But that was before Carl's parents, Josh and Ann Anderson, retained Mike Sawaya and Dale Pugh of the Sawaya Law Firm. Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines to investigate Daycare Center Alert, the Carl Anderson story, and how Mike Sawaya and Dale Pugh, partners at the Sawaya Law Firm, took a case no other lawyer would touch and got justice for Carl and his parents with a record-breaking settlement by simply showing that daycare workers are being paid to ensure the safety of the children in their charge, and that they failed to do that by their conscious inattention to what the children were doing, and also failed to recognize that the hole in the sandbox was a potential problem. Mike Sawaya and Dale Pugh have earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best people's trial lawyers in Colorado and in the nation. They have seen many innocent and hardworking people suffer needless injury, and because of that, they are driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. They learned a long time ago that if a man hasn't discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live. Their goal is not only to get justice for their clients, but to make sure that all children are properly supervised in all daycare centers across America. Because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and justice and power must be brought together so that whatever is just may be powerful, and whatever is powerful may be just. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Denver, Colorado at the Sawaya Law Firm. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mike Sawaya and Dale Pugh to the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What kind of law do you guys practice?
Well, someone once told me when they asked that question, say, we practice good law. But in the 36 years that I've had my firm, we have done everything. And we still do lots of things, but I used to do first-degree murder cases, divorce cases, securities defense cases. But in the last 20 years, we have focused primarily on the rights of the individual people as they might be harmed, especially in their person, by companies or individuals. And it's primarily an injury firm at this point, but we do workers' compensation, we do Social Security disability, and we also do veterans disability. We do certain bad faith claims and malpractice claims on occasion if they're meritorious.
Right.
And sometimes we do employment law cases. We have 18 lawyers in total, and we have many, many cases that we work on.
Now, Dale, in almost all these cases, in fact, in all these cases, every one of your clients are what we classify as the little guy, right? People who have been injured by a major corporation, right?
Correct. Our clients are always innocent victims of an accident that has created bodily harm to them, where someone else is at fault, whether it be another individual or an institution.
When you guys take on a case, you don't charge the customer anything unless you win a case, correct?
And most of them have no money for costs.
Exactly.
And costs in this day and age can be huge. They can be well into the six figures for a case that's significant. In the last few years, we've had quite a few that have costs over six figures. That's something impossible for someone that's not very wealthy.
I'm just curious, both of you. There are many types of areas of law you can practice in. You could go represent major Fortune 500 companies, both of you. Why do you choose this type of law?
Well, my initial interest in being in the law was to be a prosecutor because I wanted to be on the right side of the law. I wanted to protect victims against those who would harm them. It was a natural transition to go from being a prosecutor into being a plaintiff's attorney in a sense like this, because I am once again protecting the interests of the innocent party and trying to prosecute a case against someone who has harmed them.
You more or less agree with that, right, Mike?
Oh, totally.
You've been doing that for what, 36 years?
36 years is my practice. Yeah.
Today we are here to talk about the Carl Anderson case. And let's discuss the facts. What happened?
Well, Dale was the primary lawyer, but I was the lawyer that took it on intake. And there's a little kid that's dead in a sandbox. And he
4.5 years old. Right?
Yes, he should not have died in a sandbox. I mean, he died in a fairly shallow little sandbox. What happened? Why would this occur? And it took lawyers that were willing to spend the money and the time to develop it, because it was actually brought to us by another solo practicing lawyer who it was outside of his, it was too big for him to do.
And this was one of these cases that a lot of the lawyers wouldn't touch, right?
Well, it's an unfortunate situation when you have a youngster die. This was a situation where the youngster was at a daycare facility when this event happened. He should have been properly supervised, and frankly, the media in the area where this occurred treated it much like just one of those tragic accidents that sometimes happens. But we look at situations like this, there's no such thing as a tragic accident. There's a reason why everything happens, and if it's the fault of someone else and you're the innocent victim of that, you should have your justice.
So what exactly happened? He was dropped off early in the morning.
Correct, and this he was there all day, and this event occurred later in the afternoon when we're at a point when parents are coming to pick up their children. So people are coming and going. The staff is dealing with parents, but this was a situation that developed over a period of 30 to 45 minutes, where some older children dug a hole in this sandbox, a hole that was fairly deep, as much as 18 inches deep, which in the case of Carl Anderson, this 4-year-old boy, was 40% of his height.
Right.
The staff was aware that there was this very deep hole dug in this sandbox, and that these boys, including Carl, were playing around the sandbox and sticking their head down inside this hole.
Right.
At some point, it's really unclear how this occurred, but Carl stuck his head in this hole, and the sand fell in on top of him, and he became trapped. He couldn't pick himself out, he couldn't push himself out, and the sand got into his mouth, and he started to ingest it as he was trying to breathe in, and ultimately that caused him to become asphyxiated.
I understand that the way he was discovered, they looked out the window when they should have been out in the playground, and they discovered a lifeless body laying on the ground with a head buried in the sand. What happened then?
They brought him in and tried to resuscitate him, which was more of the problems. because once the sand was in his lungs, it took a special type of resuscitation, if it would even work at that point.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the legal strategy that your firm pursued in getting justice for the Andersons and finding out really what happened. Talk to us about the defendants, first of all.
Well, the defendants in this case were, of course, the daycare center itself, plus the staff that was on duty at the time and that should have paid attention to what this young boy and the other children were doing at the time.
Yeah.
We identified the fact that of the 3 staff members that should have been out there, only 2 of them were out there. One of them was paying attention to some very, very small toddlers, leaving one lady to pay attention to about 10 children between the ages of 4 and 8.
Right.
This one person who was trying to pay attention to everything that was going on in a fairly large playground area was dealing with a boy who had been throwing toys over the fence, and so her back was turned to the majority of the children there. They were not paying attention to what was going on in the sandbox where 4 children were playing together, and they simply dismissed what they understood to be a situation where there was a very deep hole cut in this, dug into this sandbox, which we, in Colorado, we have a law called premises liability, and we identified this as a dangerous condition on the property, which they should have known could create a problem for these young children.
And we have a photograph of that hole. I think it was 10 inches deep. It was 36.
It was 18 inches deep and 22 inches in diameter.
So this is a hole that someone could have tripped over, broke a leg, right?
Correct, and that's why
anything could have happened, especially with young kids, right?
They should have seen the hole. They should have known it was there.
My understanding is their initial response was that they blamed the volunteer fire department first for not getting there in time. That was number one, and it was kind of comedic to me in a way that because this is a volunteer fire department, you have people who volunteer their time to help the fire department. They're doing other jobs to support their families, so they got there, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or something like that. But the Colorado Department of Family Services or something discovered that actually Carl, wasn't, they didn't find him for 5 minutes. His head was buried under the sand for 5 minutes.
Well, some other children on the playground had to actually bring it to the attention of the staff.
No kidding. They were doing the staff's job. The second excuse that I saw that they used was that the volunteer fire department didn't use proper resuscitation methods, and therefore it was their fault again, right?
It's all excuses.
Yeah.
It's either stuff happens or there's an excuse.
Yeah.
That's primarily the way it is.
And then what I found outrageous, and we have the parents here today, we're going to have them on there, was the fact that they even chose to blame Carl himself.
They were suggesting that he didn't play well in the sand and they didn't play well with others.
Which played into your hands because I understand that if they knew that, why weren't they supervising him, correct?
Exactly.
If they knew a kid had a habit of sticking sand in his mouth, why weren't they out there making sure he's out of the sandbar, right?
I certainly pressed that point with them that they had, I thought that had hurt them the most when they had presented that argument, because it only made it more clear that they weren't doing what they are supposed to do as daycare workers, and they're licensed in the state of Colorado, and they're supposed to do things in a very specific protocol, and that they had, if this was in fact a true statement that he didn't play well with the sand, they should have recorded that. They should have had a history of that, and they had nothing like that.
I think your words were, those words sunk them, didn't they?
They did.
That admission sunk them, didn't it?
It did, and it showed really that it was more than just a negligence case, but something that was beyond that, and that's why we actually collected more for this family than the caps in Colorado would allow.
We have with us today the Andersons, and we are going to bring them on the show right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Josh and Ann Anderson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
It's a very tragic affair, what happened to your son. And my sincere condolences to both of you. Take us back to that day when you dropped off Carl to the daycare center, Josh.
Well, at that time I was working nights, doing security for an Air Force base. So I'd usually just drop him off, and I went home and went to bed. I got up, went to go get my older son from school because I had to do some errands in town. So, and then got him from school. Figured, why not let Carl stay at daycare a little longer because he enjoyed. I know, most parents have to fight with their kids to go to daycare. Carl wasn't that way. He enjoyed being there. So I was like, I'll go home, get my stuff together, just pick him up on my way back on the way into town. So I kind of get mad at myself for not picking him up when I picked my other son up. If I would have done that, we'd probably still be here.
When were you first notified of what happened? You went to the daycare center at what time?
Actually, I went to pick him up as it was happening. I mean, if I would have been probably 5 minutes sooner, I may not be sitting in these chairs.
So you went to the hospital with your son?
No, they flighted him out.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I was able to drive, but I was.
Mm-hmm.
But it was. I think I was probably just in a shock mainly. I think that's why I was able to keep my composure and able to function. And
then you went over to the hospital, and you heard the unfortunate news.
Yeah, we met them. Got there actually before I got there before the helicopter got there.
Yeah. The next day you went to the daycare center. What did you do?
Just try to, find out where it happened and.
Yeah, we were trying to mainly get answers. I mean.
What was the daycare center telling you?
That he was. The first story we got. Was
and there were many stories.
Yeah, we got like 3 different stories.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what originally had me raise the red flag in my mind. First story we got was that he was dumping sand over his head from a bucket, and
that's pretty hard to do when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, how can you get sand down your throat?
Yeah.
A lot of sand.
Yeah. And what was the second story they gave you?
That he was buried by some kids, and
so they were blaming other kids.
Yeah, he basically stuck his head in. There was a hole, and he stuck his head in, and the hole collapsed around him. Yeah. And then the third story we got was that they dug a really big hole, and he crawled in it, and then they buried him.
How has this changed your life? You have other kids, right? You have a son, correct?
Yes.
And he's what, 10? And then you have a new daughter, 2 years old, right? And obviously, do you bring them to daycare centers now?
We can't trust daycare. That's why she's a stay-at-home mom now. I mean,
it's pretty much turned our lives upside down.
Yeah, and you're much more guarded about where your children are and that sort of thing, right?
Right.
Very much.
First of all, I want to thank both of you for coming on the program, because you sent a message out that just because there is a place that supposedly takes care of, you got to really check it out, don't you?
Yes.
And then when bad things happen, tragic things happen, sometimes you don't get the straight answers. Wouldn't it be nice in the world if people just stood up and said, hey, I did it, I'm sorry, whatever it takes to make it right, I will.
It would be nice, but that's a perfect world.
Well,
I know we don't live in a perfect world.
Yeah. I want to thank you very much for coming here. I know it was very hard. And I really appreciate you sending this message out to folks that maybe may suffer something like this in their lives.
I know a lot of people were quite surprised when a week later I was back at work. But, I was like, one of the things I got a son that I have to still put food on the table for, and I can't sit at home, crying about the son I just lost.
You handled this case magnificently. The way you handled the strategy you used and everything. When you take on cases, the decision always comes up, whether you should settle a case or whether you should take it to trial. What usually is the criteria for deciding what to do there?
Well, we always want to settle a case, frankly. The risks of going to trial and the vagaries of having 6 jurors decide your fate are not always in your favor. And frankly, jury trials are about who wins and loses, whereas settlements can be more about what's fair, what's just, what's appropriate for the victim. And so you have a better chance of achieving true justice and a fair and full compensation if you can settle.
Right.
But we don't settle cases because, frankly, the defense wants to go to trial, and we're ready and able and willing to go.
Dale Pugh is a certified forensic examiner. Dale knows how to develop a case. And without a proper developed case with all the damages, all of the law, all of the causation, you're not going to settle it well, and you're not going to do well before a jury. When I first began my career, I didn't settle anything. I took everything to court. Truly, that was my desire.
Yeah.
And now, with cases so much more expensive, and with so much more complication to the rules of civil procedure and such, it's important that we keep in mind always how to resolve the case by settlement if possible. But if your whole idea is to settle, you won't settle. Your idea has to be to put this case together, make sure that you have all of the facts together. Mr. Pugh does that very well. That's why he's here.
Right.
I've learned how to do that over 35 years, and I know the attention that you pay to a case from the day it walks in your office till the day you take it to court is what makes the difference as to whether or not you're going to win that case or lose it by settlement or trial. Either one.
You did a great job, and I want to thank both of you for being on the program, and keep up the good work. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at InsiderExclusive.com.